Hello again, Dan Alasso, making history with another primary source for American history. And this one actually does take place in North America. This source covers the story of Francisco Vasquez de Coronado in 1540 and 1541 when he set out to try to find the 7 legendary cities of Cibola, which were supposedly awash with gold. He hoped to discover another great cache of wealth like Cortez had found in Mexico and Pizarro in Peru. So he traveled north from Mexico through what is now Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, finally reaching Kansas. He failed to find the legendary 7 cities, of course, but he did reach Quivira on the Arkansas River in northern Kansas. And so this telling of the story, the first expedition to Kansas and Nebraska, was written by Captain Juan Jaramillo, who went on the journey with Coronado, and it was translated by George P. Winship in 1896. And in this account, Jaramillo mentions buffalo herds several times. Although not having a word for buffalo, he calls them cows. So I have replaced the generic term cows with buffalo when it seems appropriate. I think I have retained the word cows once when he's referring to the female of the species. And so here is the narrative, which we pick up along the way as this journey has already begun. He says, "From here we went to another river, which we called the Bermejo, or Red River, in 2 days' journey in the same direction, but less toward the northeast. Here we saw an Indian or two, who afterwards turned out to be from the first settlement of Cibola. From here we came in 2 days' journey to the said village, the first of Cibola. The houses have flat roofs and walls of stone and mud, and here was where they killed Steve, or Estevanillo, the Negro who had come with Dorantes from Florida and returned with Friar Marcos de Niza. In this province of Cibola, there are 5 little villages besides this, all with flat roofs of stone and mud, as I described. The country is cold, as is shown by the houses and hut houses." He uses the word estufas they have. "From this first village of Cibola, facing the northeast and a little less on the left hand, there is a province called Tucayan, about 5 days off, which has 7 flat-roofed villages, with as good as or better food supply than these, and even a larger population. And they also have the skins of buffalo and of deer and cloaks of cotton, as I said. All the waterways we found up to this Cibola, and I don't know but what a day or two beyond, the streams and rivers run into the South Sea, the Pacific, and those from beyond there into the North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico. From this first village of Cibola, as I have said, we went to another in this same province, which was about a short day's journey off on the way to Tijuex, the Rio Grande River. It is 9 days of such marches as we have made from this settlement of Cibola to the river of Tijuex. Halfway between, I do not know, but it may be a day more or less, is a village of earth and dressed stone in a very strong position, which is called Tutahaco. All these Indians, except for the first in the village of Cibola, received us well. At the river of Tijuex, there are 15 villages within a distance of about 20 leagues, all with flat-roofed houses of earth and not stone, after the fashion of mud walls. There are other villages besides these on the streams which flow into this, and 3 of these are, for Indians, well worth seeing, especially one that is called Chia, and another Uraba, and another Sicuque. Uraba and Sicuque have many houses 2 stories high. All the rest, and these also, have corn and beans and melons, skins, and some long robes of feathers, which they braid, joining the feathers with a sort of thread. And they also make them of a sort of plain weaving, with which they make the cloaks with which they protect themselves. They all have hut rooms underground, which although not very clean, are very warm. They raise and have a very little cotton, of which they make the cloaks of which I have spoken above. This river comes from the northwest and flows about southeast, which shows that it certainly flows into the North Sea, the Gulf of Mexico. Leaving this settlement and the said river, we went by 2 other villages, whose names I do not know, and in 4 days came to Sicuque, which was probably Pico's Pueblo, which I have already mentioned. The direction of this is toward the northeast. From Sicuque we came to another river, the Picos possibly, which the Spaniards named Sicuque. In 3 days, if I remember rightly, it seems to me that we went rather toward the northeast to reach this river by the way we came. After crossing this, we turned more to the left hand, which would be more to the northeast, and began to enter the plains where buffalo are, although we did not find them for some 4 or 5 days. After which we began to come across bulls, of which there are great numbers, and after going on and meeting the bulls for 2 or 3 days in the same direction, after this we began to find ourselves in the midst of very great numbers of cows, yearlings, and bulls all in together. We found Indians among these buffalo, who were called on this account by those in the flat-roofed houses querechos. They live without houses, but have some sets of poles which they carry with them to make something like huts in places where they stop, which serve them for houses. They tie these poles together at the top and stick the bottoms into the ground, covering them with some buffalo skins, which they carry around, and which, as I have said, serve them for houses. From what was learned of these Indians, all their human needs are supplied by these buffalo, for they are fed and clothed and shod from these. They are people who go around here and there, wherever seems to them best. We went on for 8 or 10 days in the same direction, along those streams which are among the buffalo. The Indian who guided us from here was the one that had given us the news about Quivira and Arache, and about its being a very rich country with much gold and other things. And he and the other one were from that country I mentioned, to which we were going. And we found these 2 Indians in the flat-roofed villages. It seems that as the said Indian wanted to go to his own country, he proceeded to tell us what we found was not true. And I do not know whether it was on this account or because he was counseled to take us into other regions by confusing us about the road, although there are none in all this region except those of the buffalo. We understood, however, that he was leading us away from the route we ought to follow and wanted to get us onto those plains where he had got us, so that we would eat up the food and both ourselves and our horses would become weak from the lack of this. Because if we should go either back or ahead in this condition, we could not make any resistance to whatever they might wish to do to us. At last, as from the time when, as I said, we entered the plains, and from this settlement of querechos, he led us off more to the east, until we came to be in extreme need for the lack of food. I believe we had been traveling 20 days or more in this direction. We all went forward in one day to a stream which was down in a ravine in the midst of good meadows, to agree on who should go ahead and how the rest should return. Here the Indian Isopite, as we had called the companion of the said Turk, was asked to tell us the truth and to lead us to that country which we had come in search of. He said he would do it, and that it was not as the Turk had said, because those were certainly fine things which he had said and had given us to understand about gold and how it was secured and the buildings and the style of them and their trade and many other things told for the sake of prolixity, which he had led us to go in search of them with the advice of all who gave it and of the priests. He asked us to leave him afterwards in that country, as it was his native country, as a reward for guiding us. And also that the Turk might not go along with him because he would quarrel and try to restrain him in everything he wanted to do for our advantage. And the general promised him this and said he would be with one of the 30, and he went in this way. And when everything was ready for us to set out and the others to remain, we pursued our way, turning all the time after this toward the north, for more than 30 days' march, although not long marches, without having to go without water on any one of them, and among buffalo all the time, some days in larger numbers than others, according to the water which we came across, so that on St. Peter and Paul's Day we reached a river which we found to be there below Quivira. And when we reached the said river, the Indian recognized it and said that was it, and that it was below the settlements. We crossed it there and went up the other side on the north, the direction turning toward the northeast, and after marching 3 days, we found some Indians who were going hunting, killing the buffalo to take the meat to their village, which was about 3 or 4 days still farther away from us. Here, where we found the Indians and they saw us, they began to utter yells and appeared to fly, and some even had their wives with them. The Indian Isopite began to call them in his language, and so they came to us without any signs of fear. Some satisfaction was experienced here on seeing the good appearance of the earth, and it is certainly such here among the buffalo, and from here on. The general wrote a letter here to the governor of Jaraje and Quivira, giving him to understand that he was a Christian from the army of Florida, led astray by what the Indian had said of their manner of government and their general character, which he made us believe. So the Indians went to their houses, which were at the distance mentioned, and we also proceeded at our rate of marching until we reached the settlements, which we found along good river bottoms, although without much water, and good streams which flow into another, larger than I have mentioned. There were, if I recall correctly, 6 or 7 settlements at quite a distance from one another, among which we traveled for 4 or 5 days, since it was understood to be uninhabited between one stream and the other. We reached what they said was the end of Quivira, to which they took us, saying that what was there was of great importance. Here there was a river with more water and more inhabitants than the others. Being asked if there was anything beyond, they said there was nothing more of Quivira, but there was Jaraje, and that it was the same sort of place, with settlements like these and of about the same size. The general sent to summon the lord of those parts and the other Indians whom they said resided in Jaraje, and he came with about 200 men, all naked, with bows, and I don't know what sorts of things on their heads. He was a big Indian, with a large body and limbs, well proportioned. After he had got the opinion of one and another about it, the general asked them what he ought to do, reminding us how the army had been left and how the rest of us were there, so that it seemed to all of us that as it was already almost the opening of winter, for if I remember rightly, it was after the middle of August, and because there was little to winter therefore, and we were but very little prepared for it, and the uncertainty as to the success of the army that had been left, and because the winter might close the roads with snow and rivers which we could not cross, and also in order to see what happened to the rest of the force left behind, it seemed to us all that His Grace ought to go back in search of them. And when he found out for certain how they were, to winter there and return to that country at the opening of spring to conquer and cultivate it. Since, as I said, this was the last point which we reached, here the Turk saw that he had lied to us and called upon all these people to attack us one night and kill us. We learned of it and put him under guard and strangled him that night so that he never waked up. With the plan mentioned, we turned back, it may have been 2 or 3 days, where we provided ourselves with picked fruit and dried corn for our return. The general raised a cross at this place, at the foot of which he made some letters with a chisel which said, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado, general of that army, had arrived here. This country presents a very fine appearance, than which I have not seen a better in all our Spain, nor Italy, nor a part of France, nor indeed in the other countries in which I have traveled in His Majesty's service. For it is not a very rough country, but is made up of hillocks and plains, and very fine appearing rivers and streams, which certainly satisfied me and made me sure that it will be very fruitful in all sorts of products. Indeed, there is profit in the buffalo ready to the hand from the quantity of them, which is as great as one could imagine. We found a variety of Castilian prunes, which are not all red, but some of them black and green. The tree and fruit is certainly like that of Castile, with a very excellent flavor. Among the buffalo, we found flax, which springs up from the earth in clumps apart from each other, which are noticeable as the buffalo do not eat it, with their tops and blue flowers. And very perfect, although small, resembling that of our own Spain, and sumac like ours in Spain. There are grapes along some streams, of a fair flavor, not to be improved upon. So, Jaramillo's opinion of the country in northern Kansas is that it is beautiful and possibly productive, and he was very impressed with the buffalo herds. So, I hope you found that a little bit interesting. Thanks very much for listening. I will see you again very soon.